It's always good to have raw materials on hand. Things like wood, leather, scrap metal, or cloth. With enough, you can make yourself something useful even after a societal collapse. But these things aren't always equivalent to having something pre-made and pretty, especially not without skill and a selection of tools, some of which may require power you won't have on hand after grid down. What kind of a workshop would you need, and how much energy and time would you have to expend to turn a pile of scrap wood into a useful box like this? Or for that matter, turn scrap like this, which copper bullion is often compared to, into something shiny, portable, and barterable? What kind of balance is best to have on hand for the apocalypse? Recently, one of the viewers of a video of mine commented that copper like this nice bullion round is worth no more than the scrap it could be sold for to a scrap collector. This got me thinking again about how a raw material and finished material each have their place. Take this wooden box, and this piece of wood here. I have plenty of wood, both scrap and firewood in my yard, but is it of a good enough quality to make something useful or barterable should the time come? Or is it of poor shape? Or does it include some toxic substance like methyl bromide used to treat pallet wood? Maybe if I had nice pine trees in my yard, I'd have enough to sell to someone locally who would harvest it. An analogy to selling copper scrap pipes you picked up somewhere. But how much use would a fine tree of pine wood or oak, for that matter, be to me if I don't have the proper tools or skills to make something useful from it? I could have an entire yard of majestic trees with wood that I could sell to no one, nor could I make smooth, sturdy planks from them if I lacked the tools, time, and knowledge to transform the raw material into a more useful or desirable form. How about these leather scraps? I've made knife sheaths and other useful items with them, but my results are hardly professional. I can use these scraps in a pinch to patch something, and the laces are useful in many ways. But if I go to sell a pile of leather scraps, I won't get much for them, or my handiwork. Not without significant time invested into improving my leatherworking skills. On a related note, let's take copper or silver. If you've looked into pouring your own bars or rounds of a desirable metal, you may have run across amateur pours. The amount of time, fuel, and effort, not to mention skill and knowledge, that goes into nice-looking self-poured precious metals is no small thing. And, as I've mentioned before, a bucket full of pennies is going to be mostly copper, but other elements are in there as well that release toxic gases when melted. So, while you could have a garbage can filled with all manner of copper or even silver scrap you collected, getting that from this to this is not simply a matter, for most people, of walking out to the garage and making it happen with an hour of casual labor. You need significant preparation to do it right and successfully. I have the molds, tools, a crucible, and other items I've collected over the past few years to help me with such things, but it's still not a sure thing I'll get the desired result. In fact, I've played around with primitive fire furnaces, and I just didn't get the temperatures required for smelting, for example. I'm not looking to use propane simply because I know I won't be able to count on the availability of propane after grid down. So, I like to work with copper that's already in a pure state and in a form that's easily annealed and worked instead. Copper is forgiving because you don't need to heat it to a melting point to get it to a point where you can work it. You can anneal it to make it ductile, and that can be done with roughly only a third of the temperature required to melt it. For those who don't like to do math, a good campfire provides enough heat to allow you to anneal copper. But if you use an oxyacetylene torch, you can achieve the same results much faster, in seconds, assuming you have the tools and fuel. I like my projects to assume I won't have tools that require fuel, which plays into preparation for societal collapse. Or if I do, I need to have a lot of fuel on hand. Like I have candles and canned heat, since they are small and don't take up much space. Look at this oxyacetylene torch setup and you'll see why I'm hesitant to add that to my collection of tools, though I'm sure someone will point out a handheld version again. I'd rather not be dependent on needing more fuel after grid down, unless the thing can last for ages. I am open-minded, of course. Torches aside, even with primitive means of heat, copper can be annealed, hammered to shape, and annealed in a cycle over and over until you achieve your desired shape, which makes it a great material for crafting. One day soon I'll share a video of how copper rounds can be used to make something interesting just through annealing and hammering and then annealing again. But at the end of the day, while I want to have copper to form into things, I also want a nice balance of already formed copper that is attractive and worthy of barter and collecting. Not just a big tub of scrap or old tarnished second rounds I picked up from the Golden State Mint. The great thing about inexpensive copper rounds is that they are not just a novelty. They're portable, attractive, and I won't miss hammering one into something else I might desire should the need arise. Recently, one of the viewers here asked if I was into metal detecting. It sounds very appealing, but it's yet another thing I'd need to buy equipment for and find a place to store in my home. Tools are great, but if my job takes me overseas, I might need to find a place to keep the endless tools and supplies for hobbies and crafting. Like the aforementioned torch setup. Even now, all of my rock tumbling supplies, metalworking supplies, leatherworking supplies, survival tools, fishing gear, camping gear, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. All those need a place and take up space. And that got me to thinking about what I may need to have in a few boxes at some point that's just portable and already made. As much as I love being able to craft anything, to be ready for anything, what if I have to leave most of it behind? What are the critical items I'd need to pursue my crafting and yet have something I could barter away quickly without spending significant time and resources turning raw materials into something finished? I'll admit my guilty pleasures in having more of a balance of finished copper, like the things that Liberty Copper offers, and some silver, which I'll get on other sources like Bullion or the Golden State Mint, and some collectible coins. I just like looking at them. But the nice thing about a copper round bar, as I mentioned, is that it's beautiful, but it's not so expensive that I can't look at it and say, maybe I'd like to learn how to make a ring out of it someday, or anneal and hammer it into a small bowl, or a simple knife, or a nameplate, or even a crude utensil. What would you carry with you if you had to uproot and carry only a tenth of what you currently have with you? That's a question for me that I'll save for a future video. And until next time, it's Copper Mutant, signing out.